the school, I include biotic species and abiotic species. Biotic species, principal, parents, these guys, and the pedagogical technologist. All right, this is one biotic species within the school. And then environing them are the abiotic species, the ways of doing in a school. And the ones that I think are important for this study include professional development, and what else do we have here? Teaching through IT, relationships, shared vision, and I culled these from the literature on school change through technology, policies, infrastructure, and leadership. Okay, so I consider these abiotic species, and they work with the biotic species, including pedagogical technologists, and in some, you get a school. All right. Now, what else interests me besides these species at the global and school levels is the individual himself, all right, the pedagogical technologist. How does this guy influence the school's ways of doing through technology just because of who the person is, all right, regardless of the environment? So I was looking at certain indicators, and I took this from a lot of instructional designer literature because there really isn't a lot of literature on personalities, cases of IT coordinators or instructional designers. So I had to read a lot about who these people are, and I developed these internal indicators of how the pedagogical technologist impacts a school's ways of doing, including disposition, professional role, philosophy, values, beliefs, and assumptions, professional experience, goals, and vision, and of course, most importantly, TPAC, all right, technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge. So, in sum, this is how I understand how the pedagogical technologist, because of these things, because of the interaction between the pedagogical technologist and these species, ultimately impacts these ways of working with and through technology. That's my research question. Okay, let me quickly move. Okay, research design and methodology. This is going to be qualitative research, case study research. Again, I've read Yin and Merriam and Stake, and this is useful when studying educational innovations, pedagogical technologist in schools being an innovation, and the boundaries between the phenomenon and context are not clearly evident. That's right. You can't necessarily study the pedagogical technologist in a vacuum, right? As we established, definitely very context-specific for the emergence of this kind of role. Descriptive and heuristic. Okay. Multiple case studies. I consider them instrumental. That is, the sum of all of these case studies can provide a means to support a theory about pedagogical technologists. Replication logic. We can consider each of these cases in my research a separate experiment to support the theory. Analytical generalization versus statistical generalization. I have 4 cases. I cannot make a generalization about a population or a universe. I cannot. Right? It's not statistical generalization, but what multiple case studies and qualitative research are good for is analytical generalization, again, supporting theory building. Okay? Sampling, opportunity for learning. I have 4 guys. Curiously, one of them dropped out, but thankfully I met another one yesterday. All right. Curiously, but one of the schools I wanted to study, in fact, are not. Let me say, how do I explain this? The pedagogical technologist in the school has left, but the school is choosing not to replace the pedagogical technologist. So I was like, okay, I cannot study this school anymore. But I did find someone else to study. All right, balance with variety. I have some people who are insiders in the school, some people who are outsiders in the school, some people who are in charge of just one section, primary section, someone who's in charge of both sections, primary and secondary section. Hopefully I can get the guy in the ESF who's in charge of several schools. So there's balance with variety, just minor adjustments in each experiment. All right, and the schools likewise, they are are non-mainstream schools. So on the one hand, they may face similar environments. I mean, these schools big in Hong Kong, maybe their community might be similar, the people they deal with might be similar, yet there's still difference in the way schools do things. Some might be like Chinese International, using a very unique Chinese and English approach to education. It might be German-Swiss, where you have a German stream and like an international stream. So there's some differences in these schools as well. Okay. Data collection, methods, instrumentation. I'm going to be interviewing these guys. I'm going to be observing them at work. I'm going to be interviewing principals and colleagues. I'm going to be observing lessons and taking field notes, taking photographs, and reviewing documents. Finally, I'm going to take a grounded approach to analyzing this data. Types of validity. I'm going to, of course, be comparing the data that I have within each case to make sure that there is some kind of consensus meaning in the data, and then between multiple cases, to make sure, again, that it supports one theory. And I think that's about it. Yeah, that's it. Wow. Great. Any questions? Jing Jing.
It's just to, I think I read a lot about learning technologists. I'm just wondering whether you will kind of mention that term in your thesis, or you're just going to adopt pedagogical technologist. Also, another question is, when you choose to study these people, how do you identify them as pedagogical technologists? Is that your thesis you're going to show actually those people whose roles are in this, and then you can call them pedagogical technologists, or you identify them as a school saying these are pedagogical technologists?
Well, for my study, I've defined the pedagogical technologist as full-time pedagogical support for a school. So this person, again, is neither a technician nor a teacher. And they have different titles, right? You mentioned the learning technologist. Did Diana Lorillard use that term?
I think in the UK, people generally call these people learning technologists.
Yeah.
It's a common term.
Here there are different terms as well. ICT curriculum leader, and there was like something else they used in California, some other term. This guy comments in my YouTube video. It's like, this is what we call in California. I was like, okay, sure. But I'm just using this term, and again, I keep it purposefully vague just so it creates the sense that this is something new. You don't really have a mental model of it, so I can construct it for you. But do you think it's worthwhile for me to mention that?
I just think about very deeply, but I just thought you might got yourself into a circle. So whether you start with this term or you end up with this term, so you might if you actually identify someone who is doing this kind of job, and then from your findings you could say actually they are pedagogical technologists who is generally conducive to learning activities when they deal with technologies at the schools, or you should start with this term saying those are the type of people we need, and then trying to kind of differentiate them from other technicians and teachers. So nice. I'm not sure myself as well. I just thought from the presentation that you might need to find your position at the beginning of your research.
Thank you. You know, I think I started from the former. I found these guys first, and I was like, who are these guys? And I just started hanging out with them, and again, the curious thing is that they're part of this kind of tight-knit group. They're clubby. And I was like, okay, so who are these guys? These guys are special. And I was like, okay, what do they have in common? And once I figured out what do they have in common, then I was like, okay, now we have grounds for something special, some kind of research. These are special ones in their context and who these people are to be successful in where they are as well. Any other questions? Cool. Thanks, guys.